To move the amendment standing in the name of Caroline Jones. Just over 2 years ago, the government published, at taxpayers' expense, a glossy 16-page document which went to every house in the country, predicting the end of the world if the British people had the temerity to vote for national self-government. David Cameron made speeches up and down the land warning of the dire consequences, assuming the role of the fat boy in the Pickwick Papers who said, "I want to make your flesh creep." The whole of the business and media establishment, government, civil service, were devoted to trying to browbeat the British people into voting to stay in the EU, and yet 17.4 million people, the largest democratic vote ever in the United Kingdom, voted to leave the EU. And in Wales, where a majority of the people voted to leave, the votes were highest in the Valley's seats, like Blaenau Gwent, which I think holds the prize for the highest percentage of Leave voters, by two-thirds voted to leave. Now, here I join the First Minister because, in that part of his speech where he referred to the shambolic negotiations which have been conducted by Theresa May and her ministers in the last 2 years. This indicates a total lack of preparation on the part of the UK government for life post-Brexit, which is, I think, a betrayal of what those 17.4 million people voted for. Theresa May is one of those people for whom her indecision is final, because the government ping-pongs around from day in and day out, as the First Minister has eloquently described. And I never thought I would say this about anybody, but actually Theresa May makes John Major look like a paragon of decisiveness. That at the end of 2 years, nearly, since we had that vote, the upshot is that we are about to become just a non-voting member of the EU, it seems. And I'd like to quote from an article which was just a few days ago published by Daniel Hannan, a Conservative member of the European Parliament, where he said the government is inching towards an open-ended transition period that will leave almost everything as it is. Brussels will continue to run our agriculture, our fisheries, our overseas trade, our employment laws. We'll continue to pump out squillions across the Channel. Our laws will remain subject to Euro judges. Only one significant thing will change. We shall lose our representation in the EU institutions, and with it, our ability to block harmful new laws. So why is Britain contemplating a form of thraldom that none of the EU's other neighbours would dream of accepting? Why is Britain, the world's fifth economy and fourth military power, contemplating a form of thraldom that none of the EU's other neighbours, not Albania or the Ukraine, never mind Norway, would dream of accepting? Is it sheer ineptness, or do some of our officials actively want it? And I think the answer to those questions is both. I give way to...
Thank you very much. It's ironic to have you quoting back at us that we're going to end up with the worst of all worlds, because that's exactly what the Remain campaign warned would happen. But we were assured by you and Nigel Farage that this would be a cinch, that we'd sort out all these trade deals within 24 hours. We said this was nonsense. You're the one who sold people up, and you're the ones who should be apologising for this con trick.
I'm certainly not going to apologise for the government's failure in negotiation, of which I have had no part. If Nigel Farage and I had been in charge of the negotiations, I thought the outcome would have been very different indeed. So I accept the implied compliment from the member for Llanelli. I mean, it's extraordinary that the government has not played a stronger hand in these negotiations, because the truth of the matter is that the EU sells every year £135 billion more goods to us than we sell to them. And trade in goods, of course, is covered by the single market legislation, whereas trade in services, where it's the other way around, the UK sells to the EU £92 billion worth of services more than they sell to us. And the single market does not exist in financial services, so we do not get the benefit of the single market to the same extent as the EU. That should have been an enormously powerful bargaining counter in the hands of the British government, but they've completely blown it. They've made no preparation for no deal. We've got a situation now where budget payments are going to continue to to be made, but not linked to a trade deal, which is what should have happened right at the start, and the security guarantee which the government has given to the EU is unconditional without getting anything in return. As a negotiating ploy, they have absolutely failed. The EU has entered these negotiations as a hostile power, determined to make them fail, to help us remain inside the EU. The Labour Party's position is actually incoherent because they want us to leave the single market but actually stay in the customs union, to make it impossible for us to do free trade deals with the rest of the world. Theresa May started, and I'll finish on this point, Theresa May started these negotiations saying that no deal would be better than a bad deal. Well, unfortunately, we will be leaving these negotiations with the bad deal. The Conservative Party, I think, has a lot to answer for in these negotiations, because a house divided against itself cannot stand. The result has been actually a betrayal of the British people.
Call
on Leanne Wood to move amendments 3 and 4 tabled in the name of Rhina Piorwerth. Leanne Wood.
The government's motion is